everybody, it's Professor Khalil Amani, and this is Khalil Amani's World 100. We back for another exciting video dealing with this whole Jewish and Hebrew and first Christians and all that craziness. We back to talk about it some more. Yes, we is. Yes, we is. We back to talk about it some more. And so on this episode, I'm going to show you more specifically that the word Christian was a derogatory term placed on the backs of Paul's followers as something negative. But we must be clear about the fact that back then there were two different types of Jesus followers, Jesus movements. This is where people like Jake Doctrine, aka Struggle Doctrine, aka the Hebrew Israel Doctrine, gets it fucked up. Because he thinks everybody believed the same thing. And they didn't. And they didn't. There was much dissension between the leader of the Jerusalem church under Brother James and the leader of the Gentile movement, Brother Paul. That they had different theological and ideological views of Jesus and what it meant to be a follower of Jesus. Struggle Doctrine doesn't understand that. For Struggle Doctrine wants to make the point that the first Christians were Israelites. We've already buried that subject. We've already knocked that out the park. It is a lie. The first Christians were not Israelites. The first Christians were Gentiles. If you need to understand that, go back and look at my last two videos. That's right. But we want to deal with this word Christian. Because this guy, Struggle Doctrine, he calls himself an Israelite Christian. Where's all my papers at? He called himself an Israelite Christian, which is a great oxymoron. I said, Struggle Doctrine, Jake Doctrine calls himself an Israelite. Oh, that's the wrong one. I got the wrong one up there. I got the wrong one up there. Excuse me. Let me find the right one. There it is. I look in the camera and said, that ain't what it say. Here it go. Struggle Doctrine calls himself an Israelite Christian. Okay. But there's something very problematic about calling oneself even a Christian. You see, Jake Doctrine, this Hebrew Israelite Struggle Doctrine, they're all the same people. Jake Doctrine, Struggle Doctrine, and Israel Doctrine are the same person. So I might use those words interchangeably. Just understand, I'm talking about the same person. But Jake Doctrine, he has a major problem with people, black folk, using the phrase Hebrew Israelites. Hebrew Israelite. Now, I gave him the information, the documentation, and the research to prove that the word Hebrew was a word that was first put on the backs of Abraham's people by the Canaanites and later the Egyptians. I gave Struggle Doctrine that information. As a matter of fact, when he teaches on it, he references my video. He has my whole book and my whole finger thing going in where I show that the term Hebrew is a gentilic, a Gentile word that the Canaanites called Abraham's people when they came into Canaan. I gave him that research because I'm built like that. Because I have the books to do stuff like that. That's right. I gave him that research. Now, and because old Struggle Doctrine, old Jake Doctrine knows that the term Hebrew is a Gentile, gentilic term, that Gentiles, that the Canaanites placed on the backs of Abraham's people, he rationalized that we shouldn't use it because it's a byword. It's a slang word. It's damn near like saying nigger, the N-word. Now all of that he says, he got it from me. I'm the one who gave him the research and the understanding that the word Hebrew is damn near like saying nigger. Because it's a title given to one people by another people. So why would you use a word like Hebrew that you did not originate it? Another nation gave you that name. I gave old Pissy Piz that knowledge and information. It was new to him because he was walking around here in these YouTube streets simply arguing that because you can't find the phrase Hebrew Israelite as Hebrew Israelite, then we shouldn't use the phrase because you can't find the phrase in the Bible. He had a Mickey Mouse approach to dealing with this phrase. He had a juvenile approach to dealing with this phrase. I came along and gave him the real research, the real historical knowledge behind this word Hebrew. He might not acknowledge it, but he knows it's true. His argument was, show me the word, show me the phrase Hebrew Israelite in the Bible. If you can't show me the phrase Hebrew Israelite in the Bible, then it doesn't exist. That was the extent. That was the extent of what he had to say for the non-usage of such a phrase. I gave him the real deal. I gave him the meaning of Hebrew. I told him that Hebrews was something that the Canaanites concocted. It was a Gentile word that was concocted and then placed on the backs of the people of Abraham. I gave him that research. I made him a better person. Because I'm the teacher and he's the student. Okay. So let's put the word Hebrew aside. Now we have another problem. Now we have another problem. And that is the word Christian. So old Struggle Doctrine, he has run away from the word Hebrew and has embraced another word created by another people and given to another people. That word is Christian. And I submit to you that the word Christian, just like the word Hebrew being a byword for Abraham's people, the word Christian became a byword for the Jesus believers abroad. Not the Jesus believers in Jerusalem. Let's make a distinction. For the Jesus believers in Jerusalem, in Israel, who were the original followers and hearers of Jesus' message, they were called the Way. If you need to know that information, go back to my last two videos. I give the scriptures showing that the Jerusalem church, the people that knew Jesus directly, they were called simply the Way 5 times in the book of Acts. Go back and you can find the information. We're going forward, but it's problematic. This word Christian. For the word Christian in its inception, in its beginnings, it was a negative term. It was a derogatory term on the level with nigger and all other nasty words. But I get it. You live and you learn. You find out about this Hebrew and you realize that maybe I shouldn't call myself a Hebrew because that's not the name that the God gave Abraham's people. Even though the God of Israel would use the same word. Even the God of Israel would get caught saying, I am the God of the Hebrews. Even God in heaven took on the Canaanite name for Abraham's people. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. What kind of God is this? Where a God in heaven takes on the name that the Canaanites gave his people. You can't make this shit up. I said God, the God in heaven, or at least the God of the Bible, being weirdo, super follow the leader, he actually calls himself the God of the Hebrews. Several times, I am the God of the Hebrews. Well, the word Hebrew didn't come from Abraham. It came from the Canaanites. Why would God parrot and ape and upchuck and regurgitate and vomit a slang byword created by the Canaanites to call his people? Super weird. Super weird. Shout out to the Canaanites, though. Shout out to the Canaanites for making God Almighty use their vernacular in describing his people. You can't make this shit up. I said the God of the Bible calls Abraham's people the God. He calls himself the God of the Hebrews. Now that we know the history of the Hebrews, but it becomes problematic when you know that the word Hebrews is a byword created by one group to call another group of people. Similarly, the word Christian is a byword created by one group, the Romans, and placed on the back of another group. These people that were finding out about Jesus. It becomes problematic. And Israel doctrine, oh struggle doctrine, oh pizzy piz, oh Jake over there, he has fallen victim of going from one byword, Hebrew, calling himself, to another byword, Christian. Now I don't really blame the fella because we are in different whatever of learning. Different levels of learning. Different levels of learning and understanding. He didn't know that he gave up one byword, Hebrew, to call himself another byword, Christian. He didn't know. He didn't know he gave up one slang, nasty, derogatory word, Hebrew, only to call himself another slang and derogatory word, Christian. He didn't know. We're on different levels of education and different levels of understanding. But the point is, once you know, what do you do about it? Do you acknowledge it? Do you acknowledge that your information and your knowledge is half baked, half cooked, half assed? Let me tell you a story about myself real quick. I told it, but I'll tell it again. Back in the day, as some of you might know, I wasn't born Khalil Amani. I wasn't born with this name. The name my mother and father gave me was Lloyd Rodney Clark. Ew, to say the least. And as some of you all know, I got myself all messed up and caught up in a religious cult. A group of Hebrew Israelites down in Miami, Florida, that were commonly called the Yahwehs. I was part of that group. Yes, I was. And there came a point where I would leave after about 5 years. And after that, there came a point where I became a FBI government informant against my former cult. They were a bad, bad group, doing a lot of bad stuff to a lot of good black people. And I stepped up and I said, enough is enough. And I walked into the FBI office and began cooperating and building a case against my former Hebrew Israelite cult organization. And then after that, there came a point where I had to enter the Federal Witness Protection Program, aka Witness Security Program, aka WITSEC, for my own life and my own safety and what have you. Some of you know this. This is my background. I'm not ashamed of it. I wrote a book about it. I wrote a whole book. Everything I'm telling you is in my book, okay? 373 pages. I wrote a book about it. I've been on 6 national TV shows talking about it. I've been in most major magazines and newspapers talking about it. It's old news. It's old news. I've been in places like People magazine talking about this. See if I can show you real quick. People magazine about religious cults in America. I'm in here. I got it. Here it is. That's my cult. That was my leader who I became a government informant about. Okay? I'm going somewhere. Walk with me. And there I am. And there I am. See? There I am. In People. So I knows what I'm talking about. This is, I'm proud of everything I have done after leaving the cult. I'm proud of having been a government informant. Don't you think I'm not? You're not going to shame me about what I did in righteousness. I'm proud that I can say I put in some good work for the Bureau. Be mad, be mad. I ain't ashamed of nothing I've done in my life. Okay, let's get that out the way. But there came a time when I had to go into the Federal Witness Protection Program. And if you know anything about that, you know that they change your identity. They change your name, Social Security. They change everything. Get rid of all they change your degrees. They change your whole life. So my name, Lloyd Clark, it died. It died in 1994 when I entered the Witness Protection Program. And I became not Khalil Amani first, I became Khalil Ashanti. I'm making a point about this whole Christian thing. Walk with me, okay? But before I changed my name, I got a book, I think it was called 10,001 African American Names. Because I knew that when I went into the program, I was going to have to choose a new name. And I knew that I did not like the name I was born with, Lloyd Rodney Clark. I knew that since I was like 6 years old. Since I was 6, I didn't like the name Lloyd Rodney. I did not like it. But that's the name my mom and daddy gave me. But now at 34, I'm entering the Federal Witness Protection Program, about to receive a new name. And they told me, you can choose your name. They didn't choose it. They said, you choose it. And so I bought this book called 10,001 African American Names. Something like that. Or maybe it was 1,001 African American. Yeah, I think it was 1,001 African American names. And I began to go through every name, looking for a name that was ethnic, looking for a name that described me. Hold on, I'm looking for a book. I just had a thought. There it is. Looking for a name that was ethnic. Looking for a name that connected me to my roots and my heritage, Mother Africa. Looking for a name that was not European. I said, walk with me. I'm going somewhere with this name Christian, and I'm using my own life to demonstrate how Israel doctrine fucked up, leaving the word Hebrew only to call itself a Christian now. So walk with me. And so, I wanted a name that was ethnic. I wanted a name that was African. I wanted a name that was un-American and un-European. And I'm looking through this book, 1001 African American Names, and I see a few names I like, and I come across the name Khalil. I said, ooh, I like the way that sounds. I like the way that's written. Khalil. I like Khalil. Khalil is definitely not an American name. Khalil has something to do with the, either Africa or at least the Middle East, somewhere over there. I think I like it. I talked with my children. They said, yeah, Dad, I like that. Khalil's a beautiful name. It sounds wonderful. Khalil. And my last name, I already knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be Ashanti. I wanted to call myself Ashanti based on... Wait a minute now. I got two of those. Oh, there's one. There's one up there. I wanted my last name to be Ashanti based on reading from this book right here, Hebrew Isms of West Africa. They talk about the African tribe called the Ashanti people. Khalil Ashanti. Oh, that sounded beautiful. Khalil Ashanti. And so, when the day came where I had to go into the Federal Witness Protection Program, and the United States Marshals asked me, what do you want to call yourself? We need your new name. I said, I want to be called Khalil Ashanti. Thinking that I had reconnected to Africa. Thinking I had moved away from Europe. You following me? Khalil Ashanti sounded great. And so, after I got processed and went through the paperwork and went to Washington, D.C. and got off the plane, and they took me to their secret underground headquarters for about a week, and where I became a non-person. They had all my ID, and where they, I went in as Lloyd Clark, but when I left there, I was Khalil Ashanti. And once I got situated in my new city, they gave me a driver's license in that name, passports, and my bank card, credit card. I got all of that. I went to the University of Nebraska at Omaha. They took my transcripts from my first 2 years as Lloyd Clark, and they switched the names. And when I went to the University of Nebraska, went there as a junior as Khalil Ashanti. Oh, the government can do whatever they want to do. They got one law for the general public and another law for everybody else. I mean, for us special people. One law for everybody else and another law for special circumstances such as mine. And so I end up thinking that I gave up my white slave master's name. I gave up Lloyd Clark. It is a European white slave master's name. I'm sure there's a master Lloyd that had a plantation somewhere. A Master Rodney that had a plantation somewhere. I was happy that I had restored to myself a dignified African name, so I thought. Now I'm 34 years old. I'm still learning. I'm still studying. I actually became a Black Studies minor and a religion major at the University of Nebraska. So I'm still growing now. I'm 34. I'm still learning about, my African heritage and stuff like that. And taking the name Khalil, I thought I was doing the right thing. Let me show it to you. I bring receipts even in my own life. Here we go. Here we go. There I am. I'm at the University of Nebraska. And as you see, my name is Khalil Ashanti. See? That's me at the age of 34 years old. See? And I was presented this award by there's another college in Omaha called Dana College. And a young man presented me with a certificate for just being a good, mentor kind of thing. The Board of Regents, Administration, and Faculty take pleasure in presenting this certificate of appreciation to Khalil bin Ashanti. Now, Ben wasn't my official last name. I just put that in there. But the Ashanti is what I'm talking about. That is an African name. But this name here, as I began to research, it became highly problematic for me. You understand? But yeah, I got this way back in what year was this? 95, 96? 95. I got this certificate from this college called Dana College. But here's my college identification as Khalil Ashanti. Okay? Y'all staying with me? Are y'all following what I'm talking about? I'm talking about the problematic nature of names. The problematic nature of names. How the name Christian is got to be problematic now for old struggle doctrine. And I'm going to get to why in a minute. I'm going to show you the research. But as I began to study as a minor at the University of Nebraska and I'm reading hella Black history at the same time. You know what I stumbled upon? I stumbled upon the fact that my name, Khalil, number one, was not African. Number two, that it was a Middle Eastern Muslim Arabic name. I said, oh shit. But that wasn't the worst. I'm telling you about my pitfalls, my understandings. But what I came to understand even more than the fact that the name Khalil was a Middle Eastern Arabic Muslim name, what I stumbled upon in my research as a Black Studies minor at the University of Nebraska was this. I was so caught up and consumed with the transatlantic slave trade that brought 10 to 15 million Africans from Africa to the Americas and to Brazil and whatnot. I was so consumed. I had on horse blinders about what happened during the transatlantic slave trade. where the whites, Europeans, and the Portuguese, and the Spaniards, and the Europeans, and the Jews brought Africans to the Americas. I was so consumed in that history that I wasn't aware that there was a slave trade before the transatlantic slave trade. And guess who ran that slave trade? The Arab, the Muslim, the Middle Easterner. I said, God damn, I done fucked up. I have exchanged a European slave master's name, Lloyd Rodney, and I have adopted another slave master's name, Khalil of the Arabs. See, when you are truthful, you acknowledge your mistakes. And that was a faux pas, a misstep. But it was because I was still in my formative learning state about who I was as an African in America. I didn't fuck around and exchange one slave master name for another slave master name. I didn't fuck around and gave up my European slave name for a goddamn Middle Eastern slave name. In my research, I knew all about the transatlantic slave trade. I knew all about the Portuguese and the Spaniards and the Europeans and the Jews, and I knew all about Columbus and Bartholomew de las Casas, and I knew all about the crimes against humanity in the Western Hemisphere. But then one day, as I'm researching and reading, I stumble upon another slave trade that was 1,000 years before the slave trade that brought my black ass to America. It was called the Sub-Saharan slave trade. Goddamn, son of a bitch. I done fucked around and took the name Khalil, and that belongs to another goddamn slave trader, an Arab slave trader. Goddamn, Khalil. I'm making a point. I'm confessing my misstep that I gave up a European slave name only to attach myself to another slave name. I started reading about this other slave trade that happened about 1,000 years before the transatlantic slave trade. I started reading about these Arabs, these Muslims, these Muslims, these Islamists, and how they had a slave trade that they ran roughshod on the continent of Africa. They were making niggas in Africa convert to Islam by the sword, accept Islam or death, niggas. They were all going through all the Sudan and all over the place, even the western shores of Africa. I'm talking about the Muslim. And then I started realizing that, yeah, I do see a lot of Africans with Middle Eastern names. And then I read about people like Mansa Musa, Mansa Kankan Musa. They say he was the richest man to ever live. Richer than Jeff Bezos and richer than Elon Musk. Richer than all those Arab sheiks that we see today. They say Mansa Kankan Musa was the richest man to ever live. But the motherfucker was a Muslim. How did this African man become a Muslim? He became a Muslim because of that same ideal that the Muslim invasions, or as they called it, the Muslim campaigns, ravaged and razed the continent of Africa. Facts upon facts. That I had exchanged a white slave master's name for a goddamn Arabic slave name. My research found out that it was the sub-Saharan slave trade that became the blueprint for the transatlantic slave trade. Goddamn. That it was the sub-Saharan slave trade by the Muslims, by the Islamists, by the Arabs, that they were the ones who taught the Portuguese and the European and the Spaniard and the Jew what kind of profit can be made in the selling of human flesh. These are things you learn when you study. So I made a boo-boo. I took the wrong fucking name. I got part of it right. My last name Ashanti, that was correct. But the Khalil, that was an Arabic name. And the Arabs, they had a slave trade and they had a whole pogrom, a systematic annihilation of African culture and African religion and religious systems. They replaced it with Islam. By the sword, I must say, by the sword, not peacefully. And so, I can tell this is going to be kind of a series. So excuse me, if I don't get to the information about Christians on this one. I'll come back and do a part 2. But I think it's interesting to understand the mentality that I had versus the mentality that struggle doctrine must be wrestling with as this information becomes available. I said Israel doctrine, he got to wrestle with it now, because now he calls himself an Israelite Christian. And now he's hearing this information that even the name Christian was a derogatory name placed on the Jesus people, just like the Hebrew name. It's got to be disconcerting. But going back to my story, and as I began to study, I realized that I was wrong for choosing the name Khalil. I was wrong. That I had summarily changed my birth name, a European slave name, Lloyd, for an Arabic slave name, Khalil. And I realized that the Arabs, they were as bad, if not worse, than the goddamn transatlantic slave trade. See, the transatlantic slave trade, it lasted about, 400-500 years. The sub-Saharan slave trade, that shit went on for about 1,000 years into the 20th century. And then I came across a book like this. I want to read this. A book like this called Bittersweet Encounters. Bittersweet Encounters. The Afro-American and the American Jew. The fact that it says Afro-American, that lets you know this is an old book. But this book has a paragraph that illustrates everything I just said about the Muslims, about the Arabs, that they were slave traders. Let me show it to you. And then we're going to move on. Let me show it to you. Let's just see when I'm sure this book was written in the 60s or some shit. See, I found this book 1993. I was still Lloyd Clark. May 15, 1993. I was 33 years old in 1993. But I was on this shit for a long time. This is before Israel Doctrine found out about being a Hebrew Israelite, before he went to Brother Bowie's church. But look at this here. Let's just see the date of this. I want to see the date. Yeah, see? 1970. I was 10 years old in 1970, and this book is older than Israel Doctrine. I know because when it says Afro-American instead of African-American, I knew that book had to be in the 70s when they were using the phrase Afro-American. But look what they wrote. Oh, shoot. I didn't even cue up that little... Oh, shoot. I was supposed to have that queued up. Yeah, there it is. I found it. This is what, in 1993, although in 1993, Although in 19, let me just read it first. I should have paid more closer attention, but I didn't, because this was before I took the name before I took the name Khalil Ashanti. I had the information, but it didn't register. And so right here it says, for any black man to think of himself as being a natural ally of the Arabs is comparable to the final thread of the screw being turned. The Arabs, in league with the Portuguese, were the chief instigators and the main profiteers of the slave trade. The ones who set tribe against tribe in a bloody massacre and then sat back and collected the human debris. The ones who raped and razed defenseless villages, enslaving men, women, and children after slaughtering the aged, infirm, and those considered unsalable. Indeed, it was the Arab who showed the white man what a fortune could be made in black flesh. I do not see how any black brother with even a passing acquaintance with our history can proclaim himself in spiritual league with the Arab. God damn. That did it. Now granted, I bought this book a whole year before my name became Khalil. And I read this a year before, but for some reason, the shit did not compute. I went on and took an Arabic name after reading a year before that the Arab was in league with the Portuguese and that they had a whole slave trade called the Sub-Saharan slave trade. So why would I take an Arab name like Khalil? I dropped the ball. Don't you all like it when I can share my life and my failures with you all to make a point about shit like this guy struggle doctrine, old Jake doctrine? Do you see where it's coming together now? And so now that you understand my faux pas and my misstep, that even in my younger days of learning about who I am as an African in American, I dropped the ball when it was time to change my name. I was so happy and proud to get rid of that European colonizer name, Lloyd Rodney, only to gravitate to another colonizer, an Arab colonizer's and slave trader's name. I dropped the ball. If I had known better, if I had about a year or more to think and research, I would have known, stay away from the name Khalil. That's a slave trader name. That's the name of an Arab, of a Muslim slave trader. And they, the Arab, the Muslim, Islam, they were the ones who taught the Portuguese and the Europeans and the Spaniard how to make a profit off of African flesh. They started that shit. We focused too much on the transatlantic slave trade that brought Africans from Africa to America and the Americas. We don't focus enough on who was the progenitors, who were the starters of this whole slave trade thing. It was the Arabs. It was the Arabs. So I made a mistake with my name. But I got to live with it. You live and you learn. Now enter Israel doctrine. Now enter struggle doctrine. Now enter Jake doctrine. Oh, Pizzy Piz. Oh, he's hell. He's hellacious on not calling himself a Hebrew. Because he knows from my research that to call oneself a Hebrew is to call yourself a slang name. This word was not created by the Jews. This word was not created by the Israelites. It was created by the Canaanites and further promulgated by the Egyptians. It's a byword. It's a bastard word. It's a slang word. It's the equivalent of saying nigger. And this word was adopted by the Israelite people. And for that reason, once you get to that understanding in your understanding, yes, you shouldn't call yourself a Hebrew if you are an Israelite. Once you get to that understanding about this word here. But we have a dilemma here. We have a dilemma here. Israel doctrine, he knows that. Now, today, he calls himself an Israelite Christian. Number one, no such thing as this particular phrase. This phrase does not, you can't find it in no writings. On my last video, we heard him say that he created the phrase. It's an oxymoron simply because you can't be a law keeper and a lawbreaker at the same time. Now, to be an Israelite means you practice the 613 laws, statutes, judgments, and commandments. To be a Christian, it means Jesus came and did away with those laws. He abrogated the Torah, and all you got to do is have faith and believe in the name of Jesus, and you will go to heaven by the simple belief in Jesus. Got it? But there's a problem. The problem is that the word Christian, like the word Hebrew, the word Christian, like the word Hebrew, is a byword, is a derogatory word. Let me find the first. Look at this here. Okay. Exhibit A. You want to call yourself a Christian? Well, I want you to understand that's fine with me. But I want you to understand that the word Christian comes with negative baggage. That the word Christian was not a good thing in its inception. That the word Christian was a word of mockery and fuckery and such. We'll start with the light examples. Simply by going to places like Google or AI. This the light work shit. See? Yes, Christian was originally a derogatory term used by outsiders to insult followers of Jesus, particularly in the Roman Empire. And this derogatory usage persists in some regions and contexts to date. For example, it was a slur. It was used as a slur in Antioch and later by Roman officials to blame followers of Christ for events like the Great Fire of Rome. Today, in some countries like India and Pakistan, a derogatory version of the name is used, or the term can be used to insult Christian fundamentalists or those perceived to be overly vocal about their faith. You got it? This is what struggle doctrine doesn't know. And so while he might want to have changed from calling himself a Hebrew to calling himself a Christian, he doesn't know that even the Christian word is problematic. He doesn't know that the word Christian was a derogatory term in its infancy, in its foundation, in its beginning. Yes, Christian was originally a derogatory, a negative, a mean, a nasty, a slur, a niggerish type of word or term used by outsiders to insult followers of Jesus. And so we now know that it was outsiders in Rome who coined the phrase Christian, a derogatory term to insult the Jesus believers under Paul, under Paul's teaching. That's Exhibit 1. Exhibit A. Oh my goodness. Now, you got this guy, Struggle Doctrine, Jake Doctrine, calling himself an Israelite Christian. Going from, he used to call himself a Hebrew Israelite, but he found out that the word Hebrew is a slang word created by one people to place and talk about another people. He left that to call himself an Israelite Christian, but he didn't know that the word Christian was a derogatory term in the beginning either. Now does my story make sense now? I didn't know either. I didn't know Khalil was a slave master's name either. I didn't know it. But I can say, with a smile on my face, I can say that I understand my faux pas. I understand my misstep. I understand I got it halfway wrong. Ashanti, yes, but Khalil, no. Of course, my name was changed again after my divorce. The government would move me again, and I would change my name again, and I became Khalil Amani. Amani is a Swahili or an African name also. But that first name of mine, I got it wrong. But now we see, just on Google, just Googling the phrase Christian, it says that yes, Christian was originally a derogatory term, a dirty, negative term. Wow. Used by outsiders, used by non-Paul Christians to insult the followers of Paul. Notice that I'm making a distinction and I'm saying Paul. Because the other camp, the other folks, the other group, the other movement in Jerusalem who were the original followers of Jesus, they were never called Christians. They were called the disciples of the Lord. They were called the Way. They really didn't have a name. They never heard the name Christian or Christianity. Let me show you that, man. Let me show you that. Let me show you that. Here it is. Here it is. It ain't just Khalil talking. AI overview. No. No. No, 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 no. The term Christian did not originate with or originate in the Jerusalem church. Who is the Jerusalem church? The Jerusalem church are the original members, the disciples, the 12 disciples, and other members that actually walked and talked with Jesus when he was on earth. It is a different movement from Paul. The Jerusalem church was all about Jewish, Hebrew, and Israelite membership. And so the term Christian, it did not originate with or originate in the Jerusalem church. That term Christian, it was first applied to believers in Antioch. Who were the believers in Antioch? They were the followers of Paul. They weren't the followers of the Jerusalem church. You must understand that. The believers in Antioch, it was first applied to the believers in Antioch, where the followers of Jesus were called Christians, again, by outsiders. See? According to Acts 11:26. The disciples in Jerusalem, see, it's different. It's making a differentiation between the people, the believers in Antioch. See, you have the believers in Antioch, and then down here you have the disciples in Jerusalem. Different people, different movements, different leadership. The disciples in Jerusalem likely did not initially accept or use the name Christian, preferring to call themselves things like brethren, disciples, or the way. We've already given you the 5 scriptures where it shows the way in the book of Acts. You see? And so Israel doctrine, a.k.a. struggle doctrine, a.k.a. Jake doctrine, old Pizzy Piz, and his brown-nosing, sycophantic reader, they're wrong as 2 left shoes. They're wrong as 2 left shoes. You got 2 different movements here. You got the movement of Paul, the believers in Antioch. I said the believers in Antioch, those are Paul's followers. And then you have the disciples in Jerusalem. Those are James and Peter's followers. And James and Peter's followers, the disciples in Jerusalem, likely did not initially accept or use the name. What name? The name Christian, fools. They did not use the name Christian, preferring to call themselves things like brethren, disciples, or the way. All right. Do you love it? When you're getting the proper teaching, when you're getting the knowledge, when I'm showing you the proof that this ignoramus named Israel doctrine is totally off base. Let me show you something else in another book. I gotta put my glasses on for this. I might just finish this video. Let me let you read. Let me find it first. Here you go. I got a book here. It's by a Jew, Leonard C. Yassin. It's called The Jesus Connection. The Jesus Connection by Leonard C. Yassin. See, I bring books with scholars so you can see what I'm talking about. Let's check. I want you to see this. Check this out. Oh, Israel doctrine, he wants to say that the first Israelites were Christians. Use a lie. Let's go to this man's book, okay? Let's open it up. Let's go to this. Book is tearing up, but that's okay. Check this out. How ironic to denigrate the Jews, for Jesus whose given name was Yeshua, died not as a Christian, but the way he lived as a Jew. He, Jesus, had never heard the word Christianity. He had no idea he would be called the founder of a separatist religion called Christianity. His disciples were Jews. Saul, Shimon, and Levi were renamed Paul, Peter, and Matthew. Moreover, the early Christian church was a Jewish sect firmly rooted in such Jewish precepts as the belief in the coming of a Messiah and the ideal of bodily resurrection. Great confusion exists over the name Christian. The term was originally used to differentiate between Jews, some of whom believed Jesus to be their Messiah, and others who were not convinced. All early Christians were Jews. Now, the point that that book has wrong is they should say all early Jesus followers were Jews. But because sometimes, some of these writers, they don't want to get too deep, so they make excuses and they fall back on words that are just wrong. It should not say all early Christians were Jews. It should say all Jesus followers were Jews. Because the first Jews or the first Christians, they weren't called Christians. So this is a little off base, but I'm here to correct it. I get what he's trying to say, that the Israelites, that the first followers of Jesus, they were Jews, but he used the wrong verbiage. He should say all early Jesus believers were Jews. And the reason he should say that, he kind of contradicts himself because he says it up here. That Jesus died not as a Christian, see, but the way he lived as a Jew. He goes on to say Jesus had never heard the word Christianity or Christian. And then he kind of fucks up by using this word Christian when he should say all Jesus followers or Jesus believers. He should put Jesus believers in here were Jews. But he fucks up with the terminology. But I want you to see that. Yeah. I want you to see that. There's a couple of things in there I might let you read here. We'll hold off on that. We'll hold off on that. I meant to show you. I said this name Jesus, this name Christian, it was a nasty, derogatory, nasty term. Here's exhibit B or 2 or whatever it is. Here it is right here. Simply looking at Google. See, you can Google this stuff. See? Yes, Christian was originally used as a derogatory term by outsiders in the Roman Empire to mock and belittle the followers of Jesus. The term meaning little Christ was first used in Antioch and was given to the early believers because of their distinctive association with Christ. However, the term was later adopted by followers of Jesus as a positive and self-identifying label. See? What they did was, let me give you an example that you can understand what happens. I said the name Christian, it was originally a derogatory term that Romans gave to this new religion on the uprise to mock and ridicule them. It was a bastard name. It was a negative name. It was a slur, this name Christian. But what had happened was the Christians did exactly what black folk do with the word nigger. You know what we did with the word nigger? We dropped the ER and we put an A on there and we said nigga, and the word became a term of endearment. I'm going to take the wretchedness and the egregiousness of a nasty word like nigger, and I'm going to flip the script and I'm going to redefine it and give it a new meaning, and I'm going to make it a term of endearment. I'm going to make it a salutation. What up, my nigga? What up, my nigga? We take evil and make it good. And so what had happened was these converts under Paul were being called this ignorant, derogatory name, Christian. Look at the Christians. You fucking Christian. You's nothing but a Christian. And at first, it hurt their souls. It hurt their hearts. Just like when Africans were being called niggers, and we were like, oh, why are they calling us nigger? I'm not a nigger. I'm not a nigger. I'm not a Christian. I'm a follower of Jesus. I'm a follower of Christ. This is what the Gentiles were saying. I'm not a Christian. I'm a follower of the Christ. I'm a follower of Jesus. But over a time period, they said, you know what? Fuck that shit. Let's stop being put on the defense about our Lord and Savior. Let's embrace the word Christian that the Romans are calling nasty and niggerish and derogatory. Let's flip the script and let's just embrace that word Christian, and let's make it stand for the believers and followers of the risen Christ. And over time, that's exactly what happened. They did with the word Christ and Christian what African Americans and blacks and Negroes did with the word nigger. We made it our own, we embraced it, and we redirected it, and we gave it its own positive meaning. Not to say every black person agrees with nigger and nigga. That's a different argument. But by and large, when a black person comes up to another black person and says, what's up, my nigga? Yo, my nigga. The other person is not getting upset and want to fight because they understand the contextualization of how they mean the phrase nigga. They are actually giving him a salutation, a greeting. Same thing with the word Christian. It was wrought. It was wrought out of negativity and degradation. And it was changed. You think Israel doctrine knows this? He doesn't. But the word Christian is problematic, just like the word Hebrew is problematic. Both words were created by one group of people and attached to another group of people. Hebrew was created by Canaanites and attached to the people of Abraham. Christians was created by the Romans and attached to the people that believed in Jesus. And both words were derogatory slurs and slang. Yeah, let's move on. Let's go to another proof. I do this. I do this. I do this. What do I have this book out here for? Just a little something, something. A little something, something. Reading from the book, Who Wrote the New Testament? By Burton L. Mack. He writes this. It might be a little off, but I think it's good to read. Right here. The Jesus movement in Jerusalem. See, that's different from the Paul movement in Antioch. Got it? He has it together. He got it. The Jesus movement in Jerusalem was not a congregation of the Christ cult kind. The Christ cult kind is the shit that Paul was pushing. Instead, the Jerusalem group under James, John, and Peter had drawn the conclusion that Jesus' teaching about the kingdom of God was best understood in the combination with some form of Jewish piety. See? Confronted with Paul and his Gentile gospel, different, the Jesus people at Jerusalem under James and John and Peter were extremely troubled and opposed him, Paul. Many scholars think that Paul lost the argument on both the occasions he reported, for his accounts are obvious attempts to put the best construction possible upon him, upon unpleasant encounters. Yeah, that's a fact. Yeah. That's all I want to show you that. There's more, but I'm trying to get through. I'm trying to knock this out the park. Show you something else. From the Erdman's Bible Dictionary on the word Christian. I said from the Erdman's Bible Dictionary on the word Christian. We've done all the AI, Google stuff. Now we really digging in here. Well, that's about the Hebrews. Well, I can show it to you. See, the word Hebrew is a gentilic term referring to the Israelite people. In other words, Gentiles created this name Hebrew and gave it to the Israelite people. See? Applied to the Israelites by foreigners, Egyptians, and Philistines, which are Canaanites. See? It goes down here. The word Hebrew is applied by the indigenous populations of Canaan to those who had come from beyond the Euphrates. That's not what I want. I want to show you Christian. Do I have a marker in here? Hold on. There we go. The Interpreter's Dictionary of the Bible. Christian. I'm trying to show you that it's a derogatory term, basically. Christian. So we have an entry right here. There's the entry, Christian. And it says right here. See, this word is Greek. It means Christianity or Christian. Since Christian is a Latinism and was contributed neither by Jews who, not accepting Jesus as Messiah, would not have so entitled his followers, nor by Christians themselves. When it says Christians themselves, it's talking about the believers in Jesus. See, this is another misdirect. It shouldn't say Christian. It should say nor by Jesus believers themselves. It's talking about not using the word Christian, and then the book uses Christian. So it shows you even the scholars be fucking up their words. It shouldn't say Christian. It should say nor by the Jesus followers or the Jesus believers themselves. And you know that is wrong because it goes on to say they had other preferred designations like disciples, brothers, saints. They did not want to be called Christians, yet the book actually calls them Christians when it should say Jesus believers. Anyway. Nor did they make common use of the title Christian until the 2nd century. It has been maintained that the designation was coined by the Roman police. Facts upon facts. The designation of the word Christian, it was a Roman invention. It was not created by Paul. It was not created by the followers of Paul's movement or the followers of the Jerusalem church's movement. It was created by the Roman police or by Roman officials to designate the Christian movement as hostile to Herod Agrippa. See? The name Christian, the three occurrences of Christian in the New Testament suggest that the term was at this time primarily used as a pagan designation, a derogatory pagan designation. Also, if the term Christian was first used in jest or scorn, ridicule, degradation, it is easily understood why the Christians under Paul should have avoided it. See? One more reference. We getting it done. The Oxford Companion to the Bible. What does it say about Christian? Because followers of Jesus, they're talking about the real followers. The people, when it says followers of Jesus, differentiate from the followers of Paul. When it says followers, because followers of Jesus, they are talking about the people that knew Jesus or the people that became followers of Jesus from the people who knew Jesus, not from Paul. Because the followers of Jesus use saints, brothers, and the way, see? Disciples, see? And other designations when referring to themselves. It is unlikely that the term Christian originated among Christians. And see, that's stupid how they say that. But we can say it. Now we're talking about Paul's people. And we are seeing that the term Christian, it did not originate among Christians, the Paul believers who Paul taught. Christian, see, Agrippa, the king Agrippa uses Christian sarcastically. It's a term of reproach, degradation, nastiness, used during persecution. Thus, the term seems to have been derogatory. We keep getting that word derogatory. The contemporary Roman historians Tacitus and Suetonius used the term Christian the same way. Tacitus refers to Christians as people hated for their evil deeds, and Suetonius calls them a new and evil superstition. It first applied to Jesus' followers at Antioch, and this is kind of misleading. It should really say it first applied to Paul's followers in Antioch. But we'll let it stay. We get what they mean. Paul's followers, they actually believed in Jesus too. But you have to make distinctions between the Jerusalem followers and the Pauline followers. So when it says first applied by Jesus' followers at Antioch, he's talking about those people who came to know Jesus through the teachings of Paul. Roman officials may have coined the word to distinguish the Christian group from Judaism. Perhaps Christian was used to designate the Christian movement as hostile toward Agrippa. No matter where the term originated, it was first a word of scorn and ridicule. Goddamn. All right, we're going to wrap it up. So this is Struggle Doctrine's dilemma. Because I know he didn't know this. I know that Israel Doctrine, right now, he's sitting back going, damn, that Khalil. That's what he's doing. Because I'm throwing monkey wrenches in shit that he wants to believe in. He wants to talk that shit about not calling himself a Hebrew Israelite because of this word and its origin and derivation. Now he called himself this stupid oxymoronic phrase, but there's problematic things going on with this word Christian. I know he don't like me. This is why he don't like me, y'all. Because he's over there calling himself a Christian. Let me see if I can find where he says,
I am, who I'm not. This, that I can discern.
let me see if I can let y'all hear that little piece before we close out.
Intelligent than you. You are of the world. You can't even compare the two.
I don't know where's that.
Yes, sir. That's why I say greater is he that's in me than he that's in.
Oh, shut up, sycophant. So as we close, the term and the phrase Christian was wrought. It was wrought out of evilness. The term Christian was created by the Romans. It was a nasty and derogatory term placed on the backs of the Paul converts to Jesus' message. It was born out of nastiness. It was born out of nastiness. So understand, if you want to continue calling yourself a Christian, know that it's not a word that Paul created. Know that it's not a word that even Paul's followers and believers in Jesus created. And for sure, the original people, the Jerusalem church in Jerusalem, they never heard the phrase and they never called themselves Christians. They were simply known as those of this way. And with that, y'all, we coming back. Gotta go now. Peace.